We would be honored if you would join us.
Welcome to Unmistakably Star Wars, your source for a high-quality, informative, and entertaining look into the Star Wars galaxy.
Welcome to Unmistakably Star Wars. It is so good for you to join us. I am Jeremy, and on this episode, I'm joined by Grant.
Hey, guys.
So Grant's been writing a ton for us on the site, and I was able to manipulate him to come on the show, man. It's good to have you.
Hey, it's good to be here. I'm excited to be on.
So you just wrote a review for Galaxy of Heroes, the Star Wars game on iOS and on Android and all that kind of stuff, and it kind of led me to a pretty important question.
All right, let's hear it.
And the question is, who would you take into a fight if you could take anyone into a fight? And if you don't know, Galaxy of Heroes is basically a game on your phone, iPad, I guess. I don't know if it's on iPad, but you pick your team of heroes or villains, and you take them into a fight. And it's great because they even give you modes to where you can put some villains with some heroes and go at it against another team. So it's a lot of fun. It opens the door for a lot of the things we did when we were kids, playing with different figures like, oh, I think Vader's going to team up with Obi-Wan here, and so it opens those kind of doors. But I got to thinking, man, like, who would I take into a fight? Like, if I could pick anyone from the Star Wars galaxy. So yeah. Let's kind of walk through it, like, as who we would take in. So I'm curious who you would, since you're the experts.
Yeah, obviously I'm an expert. Well, I've got characters that I actually have, but if I could pick my ideal team, I don't even know if some of them are characters in the game. It'd be like Han Solo, Anakin Skywalker, and I'm trying to debate if it would be like Anakin, like Clone Wars, or a little bit after, and then Darth Vader. I know I'm kind of double dipping there. But in the game,
hey, they're different people, man.
Well, in the game, they're different people.
Yeah.
They're actually in the game. There's Emperor Palpatine, and there's also Darth Sidious.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, so there's two different characters. Then I'd choose Mace Windu and then Darth Maul. And that's pretty much an all-attacking team.
That's intense, man.
Yeah.
I don't know who I would take. Like, Vader, most likely.
Yeah.
Probably Sidious. Okay. Like, last night I sat down with Sam, and we were, my son Sam, he's 4, and he loves Clone Wars. I can't let him watch all of it, but there are things I can let him watch. Yeah. And you guys are going to think I'm like the most horrible parent because I showed him the scene where Sidious takes on Maul and Savage
and just completely
owns them. Yeah. And Sam loved it. So I would probably take that Sidious if I could.
Yeah.
That moment that really stuck with me. So, Vader, Darth Sidious, this is where it gets hard. I wouldn't mind taking someone that can heal.
Yeah.
But I don't know who that would be, which Jedi would bring in to be healing the whole time.
Yeah.
There's this moment to think about that. There's a moment, and the moment. It's in the second Darth Bane book. Yeah, I just finished that trilogy recently, and
it is awesome.
It's incredible, incredible. And that second book where the showdown between the Sith and the Jedi at that ancient temple or whatever, and there's just one Jedi just doing battle meditation, like making all the Jedi better and be able to stand up to Sith. And I love that idea of someone healing as you're fighting. It's so cool. So I would try to pick someone like that. I don't know who. I mean, in the game right now, I just use like some random Jedi guy, know. So I would take those. I would probably want someone like Han Solo, like just with blaster power,
scoundrel.
Firepower.
Yeah.
But then it gets a little bit hard. Like for my 5th, I would want someone maybe like a Maul, like someone that I can just sick on people.
Yeah.
That's just attack heavy. But at the same time, Boba Fett is compelling to me just with his firepower. So it would be something like that I would take in. So.
Well, my question for you is, like when you choose Vader, because technically Anakin turns into Vader before he gets in the suit. So you're talking about like Anakin or Vader pre-suit, post-suit.
Well, most people say that Darth Vader before he goes into the suit is the most powerful,
Yeah.
being that we've seen. So it would probably be that guy. But when I was saying it, I was thinking Suit Vader.
Yeah.
So yeah. Well, welcome to the show. We got a lot to talk about today, other than top fives and who would be we would be taking into battle. We're going to be talking a little bit about Rogue One Black Series previews. There's some figures and images of these figures that will be coming out on Force Friday. Some people are calling it Rogue Friday, coming in September. And so we'll talk a little bit about that on the show today. John Williams news, which has been, popping around on the internet and on YouTube and other shows, that John Williams will be coming to do episode 8. So we'll talk a little bit about that, along with an actual Star Wars Cantina coming to Hollywood. So we'll talk a little bit about a restaurant where you can step into the world of A New Hope. And then finally, our closer look segment on today's show, we're going to talk about the most uplifting of topics, death and Star Wars. And really, we're going to be dealing with the big question is of death in Star Wars, but is it a good thing? How should it be used? And we'll be looking at some of the deaths that we've seen in the films and maybe even in the animated series as well. So thanks for joining us. We'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll jump into the news.
I have good news for you, my lord.
That's so interesting.
Wait, there's something very weak coming through.
Recently on makingstarwars.net, there are some YouTube videos that were posted of reviews of the Black Series 6-inch action figures, or as Devin might say, collectibles. These awesome toys, but they were Rogue One specific. And so I want to just start off just kind of looking at or talking about what these look like. And so what we had in these previews were K2SO, the Death Trooper, Cassian Andor, and it says, it's interesting, it gives a planet name, and I don't even know how it's pronounced, but it's like EADU, Yedu, maybe? So I don't know which planet that is either. He's in sort of winter gear, so I'm not sure if it's a planet. It might be a city on Jeddah, but I'm not sure. I know Jeddah, this desert planet where we saw in the trailers, that temple and whatever. I've heard it mentioned that it's like this kind of like frozen planet, even though it's a desert situation. It's just very cold. So you have not only Captain Andor, Cassian Andor, but then you also have Jyn Erso. And it doesn't really give I think it says for her it's Jeddah. So it's the planet. So I'm really curious about the names and how they're marked in terms of like planets or cities, but I don't know, Grant, what do you think? I mean, what did you think about these figures and these previews that we saw?
Well, I really actually don't purchase a lot of collectibles. And just for me, I really would have to sit back and kind of watch the movie first. I wouldn't want to pull a Devin and go all in Phasma and then be completely disappointed. Sorry, Devin. But I thought the character, like the action figures or the collectibles, of like Jyn Erso and the Death Trooper, they looked really cool. But again, before purchasing anything, I'd like to sit back and watch the movie.
Yeah, I mean, the only one we really can guess that we'll see a lot of is Jyn, maybe Cassian. But in terms of design, dude, K2SO looks amazing. And just his design, the way his legs are interesting and how they're designed, they look really thin. But the way they've designed the toy, and obviously the way they've designed this droid, is he looks fast, agile. Even though his limbs are thin, it doesn't make me think he's flimsy or weak. It makes me like worried that he could kill people quickly.
Yeah, he might be able to.
Yeah, so like I like the K2SO. I would probably, if I was given $25 and someone said can you get just one, man, I don't know. Part of me, because I find K2SO funny and irreverent and what little I've seen of him, part of me leans to him. But on cool factor, it's the Death Trooper. I'd probably have to put down money on that. What would you get, Jyn? Would that be where you would land?
It'd be Jin or so, or the Death Trooper. I'd
Yeah.
probably be a fan of Death Trooper.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet. And,
Yeah.
and that design is really unique. I mean, the way the armor looks on this 6-inch figure in the review, and you can go to makingstarwars.net to see it. It's literally these 4 videos, and you can just watch them embedded in the site. But just the armor design and getting a kind of a close up at a toy or a collectible, I love that, and I love where they're going with them. I hope we see a lot of them in the movie, and like you said, no Phasma like moment where you get so excited to see Captain Phasma. And I remember when she came on screen in The Force Awakens, like the theater got excited, and we never really saw her. That was really disappointing because she looked so amazing. So.
Yeah.
Hopefully not with the Death Troopers, but yeah, that was kind of an interesting thing. There's also images floating around out there of like the U-wing, which is this vehicle. I think it's for the 3 3/4, and other vehicle. Like I know there's an AT-AT that's floating around out there that I've heard is just incredible and very expensive. So as these toys and images release, we'll talk more about them. Maybe in fact have an episode devoted in the future to that Force Friday and what's coming out and what we want to get. But there's another story that came out that a lot of people have been talking about, and that story is about the grandfather of the music of Star Wars, John Williams. He basically confirmed that he's doing episode 8. I was looking at an article on The Verge online, and it said the following. It said, legendary composer John Williams, he's confirmed they'll be working on the music for Star Wars episode 8. A movie sure to calm the fears of fans who would have had a tricky time imagining Star Wars without his iconic scores. We're getting a different composer for Rogue One, a guy named Desplat. And so there's already other people working on Star Wars music. Kiner works on Rebels. He did Clone Wars. I mean, there's other composers out there. But with the episodic saga films, it's always been Williams. It's going to be hard. It's hard to imagine him not doing it. He said, and he was doing a performance in Boston, and he said during the performance that he had seen an early cut of the film, and he's going to begin work on its score in the coming weeks. He's been pretty well, like, we've heard him clearly talk about Williams. We've heard Williams clearly talk about his love of Rey and his desire to write music for her. And I think Rey's theme is one of the strongest pieces of The Force Awakens. And, he says, the real reason I don't want anyone else writing music for Daisy Ridley. Just thoughts on Williams doing episode 8, Grant? What do you think?
I think it's awesome to have the continuation and the consistency, continuity, I guess. But really just, I think that the score can really make or break a movie. And so we already know what he's capable of, and just knowing that music can have like a profound impact on our lives and like really on our emotions. It can snap us out of a funk, and it can really be a way to like show expression. I'm excited for Rogue One to see a different composer.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, isn't it?
It will be interesting, but I think that's a way to kind of set it apart from the original trilogy or whatever they're calling it now.
Yeah.
But I'm excited to have Williams in there.
Yeah, it's really it's thrilling to like. I don't know about you, but when episode 7 came out, and I think there was a piece on 60 Minutes about John Williams doing the score, and we saw some of that footage that was on 60 Minutes, I think on the Blu-ray extras and stuff. And I thought to myself, how much longer do we have Williams? And there's part of me deep down, I just think that he's immortal and like he'll just keep making music. But there's this, and it kind of fits in with our theme in terms of, as we talk about later, death and the impact it has on us in story, but also in reality. I'm like, I can't imagine him not doing it. So when I heard that like he was going to do 8, I am just so thrilled. I'm excited to see what he does. Obviously, there's rumors going around that episode 8 is phenomenal and it's outstanding. People are really excited. In fact, Carrie Fisher was at a con just, I think, the other day, and she said that she was asked by someone in the audience, like, what was your favorite Star Wars film to make? And she said the last one. And people were like, wait, is that The Force Awakens or was that episode 8? And I think she was meaning 8. So it's really interesting. A lot of people are saying they really enjoy it, but I don't know if we ever, and I think he's immortal, so I don't know if we'll ever lose him, but like, who should replace him if we ever were to lose Williams?
I don't know if anyone can actually replace him.
Yeah.
He's done so many amazing scores outside of Star Wars.
Yeah.
But I think someone that has a good shot of maybe creating quality that's close to that is Hans Zimmer.
Yeah, he's good.
I mean, he did the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. He's done Inception, which is one of my favorite movies. The Dark Knight.
Yeah.
Interstellar.
Yeah.
So I think he's got what it takes to be able to maybe compete and carry over.
You know, when I first heard the Man of Steel like main theme, and I was teaching in St. Louis, and it was after school one day, and I think it was on SoundCloud or something. It was like, oh, the new score for the Man of Steel, and I'm a huge Superman fan, and so I was like, oh, I need to listen. And I listened to that, and I was blown away by it. And it's one of my favorite pieces of cinematic music in the last 10 years. And I totally agree with Zimmer. Like, I love the Man of Steel score. I love, what he did with is it Inception? Yeah, I love what he did with that. He's very much a percussionist. Like, there's a lot of drums and like it kind of, you feel it in your chest, and like where Williams goes in some different directions. I think it would be interesting with Zimmer to do one.
Yeah.
Simply because I think he can bring a unique flair to Star Wars that I don't think it would take away at all. I think it would actually propel action with his score in ways that few composers can do. So, he's one. There's not many that I would say, yes, he can, like you said, Grant, I don't think you can replace Williams.
Yeah.
I mean, he is his own thing, and the influence he's had on our culture is astounding. But Zimmer would be one. I wouldn't mind seeing, I think it's Kiner who composes for Rebels and composed for Clone Wars. He's had moments of, I don't want to throw this term around lightly, but genius in the way he has done music. In fact, I was watching the Ahsoka arc in the Clone Wars where she's framed.
Yeah.
And it was when she leaves the Order.
Yeah.
And there's this, when she walks away at the end and Anakin watches her go and they have that conversation, that whole music is deeply moving, and I'm like, I've heard that before, and then I realized it's the end of season 2 of Rebels, where Vader and Ahsoka face off. That same music is playing, and there's just some brilliant connective tissue through these shows. They're 24-minute shows, but the music has really surprised me at times. I wouldn't mind seeing someone like that get a shot at it, so it'd be really interesting.
Yeah, that's a good idea to get a little bit of a crossover like that.
Yeah, and maybe you mentioned the word continuity.
Yeah,
like that could happen. That you would have someone working in the animation that can move over. That'd be really, really interesting to see. But it seems like Williams is doing 8 guys, so we are thankful. I'm really curious how he will write some of these new characters, like some of the villains that we know that have been cast, and it's going to be really. Will he change the themes any? Like for Rey, I mean, like he'll riff on them. I'm really curious what he'll do with Kylo Ren, and how he'll score and compose music for him. So it's going to be a lot of fun to take a look at. The other story is something that Grant and I need to have a serious conversation about, because in Hollywood, there are several news stories reporting that there will be a Star Wars Cantina, sort of like a pop-up experience that they haven't, I don't think they've announced yet where it'll be, but this kind of pop-up restaurant, Star Wars Cantina, in Hollywood. The Nerdist ran an article, Nerdist.com ran an article about it. Multiple sites have, but you can actually go to scumandvillainy.cantina.com, and you can go on there, and you should be able to make reservations soon. I don't know, when I last checked, it wasn't up. But here's the basics. It's the Star Wars inspired cantina. It's this pop-up experience, has an incredible immersive environment. You eat all these galactic delicacies, you drink, you spend time taking all these pictures and all that kind of stuff. And Yeah, so you get this opportunity to kind of step into Star Wars. You can go to scumandvillainy.cantina.com and you can get all the details. But I don't know about you, Grant. Do you want to take a road trip one day and try this out, or what are your just kind of initial thoughts when you saw the story?
My initial thoughts are that it's an awesome idea.
Yeah.
I grew up going to Disneyland, and just being immersed and being able to jump into like a setting like that has always kind of been nostalgic for me. And so being able to experience like really the original Cantina from the original episode 4 would just be incredible.
Yeah.
And it's something that I wish I could take my kid.
Yeah. Would it be fun?
He's a little too young as he's 3.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I checked the website too right before we recorded, and it just has Hollywood and the zip code. So they're not really telling us where it is.
Yeah.
But they keep saying just you can make a reservation soon, but we just don't know where.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure. I don't know if you noticed this, but I'm not even sure how long it'll exist. And I know this pop-up experience had happened in England, I think. In fact, on the Nerdist.com, Amy Ratcliffe wrote the piece, and I think I heard her on a podcast full of Sith talking about this recently. It's something I would like to check out. I'm such an introvert, and like I don't know how well I would do in a situation like that. Crowds kind of freak me out, but for Star Wars, I've done all sorts of things I wouldn't normally do. We might have to take a road trip, man. We might have to do it.
Well, at Celebration in Anaheim last year, they had the mock-up of the Cantina with a bunch of extras in it, and you couldn't really get too close to it.
Yeah.
That was pretty awesome.
Yeah, and they did the same thing at Celebration Europe too, and they do interviews in there. I love that. I wonder if that's where the inspiration came when whoever's doing this. I wonder if they saw that and they're like, oh, yeah, we need to do this for real.
This would be awesome. Let's get it done.
And it could be sort of like that appetizer before Star Wars Land. I think so many people are just waiting for that. In fact, a story came out recently. We even thought about talking about on this show, but just that there's a patent out there for not an actual, but like a lightsaber for maybe the Disneyland parks. I'm really curious. So they're developing, man. And this might be, if you're in the Hollywood area and you want to appease yourself before Star Wars Land, this might be the place you want to check out. Again, it's scumandvillainy.cantina.com. Well, we want to segue into our closer look this week, and essentially we want to deal with a pretty heavy topic, but we think it could actually be uplifting. And recently we have an article coming out. Devin has been working on it. I'm not sure when exactly it will come out, but basically Devin is going to address, like in Rogue One, should the cast, the heroes, should they all die or not? Or should a vast majority? And recently we talked about The Dirty Dozen and other films like that, where you have kind of this collection of heroes going in. Obviously Suicide Squad just sort of played on that motif, where you get a group of people together, they go do a mission, and it's risky mission. Not everyone makes it. And so we're going to, obviously we'll have in print or online, we'll have an article discussing like, should they all die? But that got me to thinking about just death in general in the galaxy of Star Wars and all these stories that we've been ingesting, whether we're reading it or watching it or drawing it or playing it or whatever. And there is something unique about death in Star Wars. There's also something that impacts us in our own reality from watching that on screen. In fact, when we watch The Force Awakens, spoiler alert, when Han dies. Listening, there were people in the audience that night we saw it that cried, and what they were doing was they were connecting it to real experience. They were almost sharing an experience of something that's happened to them in their own life or echoed something that happened. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to take a closer look at death in Star Wars and what that might mean, the different deaths that we've seen and the effect it's had on the story, but also the effect that it's had on us. So we'll take a quick break.
Star Wars, nothing but Star Wars. Give me the Star Wars, don't let them end. Star Wars, if they should Star Wars, please.
Welcome back to Unmistakably Star Wars.
So we we have this closer look segment this week that seems at first glance, obviously death is something that's all around us all the time. Some of you that are even listening have been dealing with the loss of someone that you care about, or maybe even an acquaintance or someone you work with. It's something that we deal with all the time, and we even deal with it in our stories, and it is especially a theme in Star Wars. And so we thought it would be good just to like kind of look at death and how it's affected the story of Star Wars. Obviously, we've had a number of characters, main characters that have died. And so some of the things we're going to do is just talk about just the impact they've had, just our thoughts on that. But it's interesting. People come at death in a variety of ways. In fact, Emily Dickinson has a poem that's very famous, and a lot of her poems are, obviously. But she has a poem called Because I Could Not Stop for Death. And in it, one of the lines, one of the kind of stanzas, it says, because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. And so some people kind of come at it head on, almost fearlessly, and I would say Dickinson's sort of doing that in her poem there. But we have others that kind of try to dismiss it. And one poet, Harry Scott Holland, says, death is nothing at all, it does not count. I have only slipped away into the next room, nothing has happened. And that is a poem called Death is Nothing at All. In Star Wars, though, it isn't nothing at all. It's actually very important, and it's significant, and it means something. And so Grant, just as we start off, I want to like kind of list some of the names of characters that we've seen die. And they're typically, I'm going to pick some of the more major characters. I'm leaving out like Clone Wars and Rebels, although that's fair game for the discussion. I mean, obviously we want to talk about it, and obviously some of the novels as well. But here are some of the characters that have died in the 7 films that have had an impact on the story. Obviously, we have Qui-Gon and Maul. And Maul, before you realize the Clone Wars is out there. So when you saw the Phantom Menace in '99, you were pretty sure Maul was dead. And it impacted that story in that way. Also, Anakin has a type of death, in a sense, in the Mustafar. Padme dies, and we also have the Jedi in general with Order 66, Obi-Wan in Episode 4, Vader in Return of the Jedi, and then most recently Han Solo. I'm curious, Grant, of just the characters that you've seen in Star Wars. Which death has affected you the most, and why do you think that?
Well, for me, I'm trying to think. I just kind of put this in context. I turned 30 in a couple months. So
dun dun dun.
Yeah, I'm terrified, but that's a different story. So I grew up watching the original trilogy on VHS. My dad loved it, and so my brother and I grew up watching it. And because I watched it from such a young age, like the Obi-Wan, like I understood he sacrificed himself, but I couldn't really grasp it.
Sure.
And then Qui-Gon, obviously I knew that he trained Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan had a big impact on really the series. And I've heard you mention before that you could argue that it's not really a Skywalker story, it's a Obi-Wan Kenobi story. And I think that's mainly you're hoping.
Yes.
And so like I understood the significance of that, but again, I was like 11 or 12 when that came out. And then with Darth Maul, honestly, I think the story would have been better if he would have stayed dead. Or maybe Maul would have survived Episode 1 and maybe died in Episode 2. But the biggest one for me, and I think it's just transition in life, is Han Solo. He was my favorite character. Wasn't really my favorite character until I entered college. I was always a Luke guy. But just connecting with him, and especially being a parent recently, just seeing like his anguish for his son, and like I saw the movie with you for the first time. And like as Han was walking out, I'm just like, no. And it's like maybe oh yeah, it's happening. And so that one I didn't cry, but I was pretty close to tearing up.
The Han death is fascinating for me for almost the exact same reason. And you know, our children are about the same age. But I've talked to parents that have grown children or children in their late teens, and that feeling of I'm losing my kid, not to death, but I'm losing them to something they shouldn't be doing. And that they are almost destroying themselves. And your willingness to go to any lengths, and parents just in general can understand that, like, I will die for my kid, like, bottom line. And I will sacrifice, whatever it needs to for their life. And revisiting The Force Awakens, Harrison Ford and Adam Driver are incredible in that scene. And I know people they mock Driver as kind of this, goth guy or, emo.
Who would do that?
That's a good article, by the way, Grant.
Thank you.
But, they mock him for it. But you even then in that article, you say he's incredible in that moment. And I totally agree. They are so good in that scene and Driver sells Kylo Ren's or Ben Solo's kind of anguish over what he's becoming and this conflict within him. He as a teacher of high school students, I've seen that look, and I've seen that. I've been in those situations. And so not only that, but then Solo as his father, Han Solo's father, doing whatever it takes, and then the death that results in that. I mean, I think that's one of the, I agree. It's awfully powerful.
Yeah.
And, for me, Obi-Wan and A New Hope it struck me when it happened, and I was a little one. And I was like, oh, wow, like that was, I got it. He sacrificed himself.
Yeah.
He let himself go for Luke and Han and Leia and Chewie and the droids to escape.
Yeah.
But at the same time, Qui-Gon has had an impact on me because I'm a little bit older than you. I was in college when The Phantom Menace came out, and I really liked Liam Neeson's performance. I was sold on that. I was sold on Ewan McGregor's, and Ewan McGregor's Obi-Wan's response to Qui-Gon dying.
Yeah.
And the borderline anger that Obi-Wan's facing as he faces off with Maul. That's great stuff. But for me, of all the deaths, it has a lot of the echoes of the Han Solo one. It's Darth Vader saving Luke from the Emperor. And I know they've gone in and edited kind of the big no, and one of the things that was really interesting is Devin and I, several months back, we did the NPR radio dramas. And Brock Peters is the voice of Vader. And Grant, I don't. Have you listened to that?
I haven't had a chance to.
It's incredible because Brock Peters, I felt had some missteps in the NPR radio dramas, but there's this moment where he actually does give dialogue. Where in the film, Vader just before the edits and before no was added, like Vader just grabs the Emperor and throws him to his death. In the NPR. Brock Peters voices Vader in such a unique way where he goes, "My son," and he grabs the Emperor and throws him to his death, and and he dies in that moment. Like the lightning does him in, and that is so compelling, that kind of sacrifice, that even today when I watch that, I get emotional over it.
Yeah,
it's one of the best moments in Star Wars, I think.
No, I agree with that, and especially if you go back to why did Anakin turn into Vader, and it was to save his family.
Yeah.
And he ends up dying saving his family.
Yeah. Yeah, he does what he'd been setting out in a weird way to do.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt that Vader, in his own warped way, wants to take care of Luke.
Yeah.
He wants to be with him.
Yeah.
It's just so twisted, and it's amazing how Luke's compassion untwists him.
Yeah.
And that's one of the beautiful things about Star Wars. But what do you think about Rogue One, and someone says, everyone needs to die in that? Do you agree with that idea? Or a lot of people do need to die. What are your just thoughts on as we kind of get closer and closer to Rogue One and those characters?
I think the thing that's really cool about Rogue One is that everyone can die.
Yeah.
And I love movies. I love the Avengers, Indiana Jones, all that stuff. But the thing, I guess you could say, a knock against those movies is that the heroes never die.
Yeah. Or very rarely, and then they come back to life.
Yeah. Unless the comics, that's a different story.
Yeah.
But I think it's intriguing that we can get connected to these characters over the course of an hour and a half, 2.5 hour movie. And then at the end, they could all end up dying.
Yeah.
Because realistically, as long as the plans make it to the rebels, that's all we know. But at the same time, I mean, the Star Wars galaxy is huge, so they could survive, and we just don't know. Something could happen to them. something with memory, or maybe they just like they're so traumatized by the experience that they just go and hide somewhere.
Yeah, or disappear forever. Yeah, that's the interesting thing. And death in film or in stories serves stories in different ways. Like we can see characters die. Again, I get it. Maul is alive. Yeah. He's in Rebels now, but like when he was cut down by Obi-Wan in the Phantom Menace, at that point the audience was like, well, he was cut in two. Yeah. He's dead. But what that death served in that film was justice. Yeah. It was justice against someone that was evil, doing evil things, and had killed the mentor of the story, which really plays into the whole like hero's journey. One of those components of the hero's journey, we often see kind of the mentor show up and help the hero along, but in a lot of cases that mentor will pass the torch. Sometimes that torch gets passed by death, in death. Yeah. And of course Qui-Gon does that. He's like, you must train, you must train Anakin. So we see that, and so we see death bringing about justice. And I think that's rousing. I remember cheering in the Phantom Menace and the audience cheering when that happened. But I think one of the ways we look at death in these films, and one of the ones we don't talk that much about, is Padme. Yeah. And I don't know what you think about it, but do you think her death might be the most tragic in the series? Because for me, there's such an, I don't want to necessarily say innocence to Padme, but like she's not like getting her comeuppance. Like there's not justice. Yeah. She's not necessarily in combat. It's almost like she's pregnant. She's, obviously people say broken heart, all this stuff, but we know that she's this loving, wanting to redeem her husband and bring him back, and she just kind of fades away almost. That's what it feels like. And the more I think about Padme, the more tragic I find that. Have you ever thought about that? Or like, is she the most tragic death in the film so far?
I think she is. I mean, in that scene, they talk about how physically she's completely healthy, minus, having given birth to twins. Yeah. But I guess the one point I bring up, because again, I think she loses her will to live. Yeah. But after watching my wife become a mother the past couple years, my question is, I think regardless of what I do as a husband, she would still want to be around for our children. Yeah. And so it's tragic, but I don't know. It kind of just makes me kind of wonder about that a little bit.
Yeah. That's it's an interesting death in that way. Like, why did she just give up? Why, she has her kids. Like, and obviously she was choked, but they said she was healthy. So it really, there's this tension with it. But Padme in the comics, the Darth Vader comic has really done a good job of like having Vader, Anakin kind of reflect back on her and think back to her and have memories of her. Even I think in Lords of the Sith, there's a moment where Vader kind of reflects back on Padme. And every time I see her, every time she's mentioned, every time she comes up, every time there's just this sense of like, it feels like one of the great tragedies of the saga, almost. And actually one I think people don't talk about often. But with Rogue One coming out and Rebels, well, let's take it another step. Like we were talking about Rogue One, and we were talking about like, well, does death of those characters should that happen? You brought up a great point. Like we don't know, like, what's going to happen to him, and we know the plans get delivered. But I think one of the things that's exciting, like I totally agree with you, is like we don't know if these guys are going to make it. Rebels has sort of the same vibe going on. And I've heard people say, I don't see how these characters are going to survive. Well, maybe Sabine will survive, or maybe Hera will survive. Yeah. Do you sort of apply the same kind of logic to Rebels as you do like Rogue One? Or is it a little bit different for you?
I think it's a little bit different. Yeah. Full disclosure, I finally got caught up on Rebels. And by caught up, I finally actually watched the entire two seasons, right? Yeah. This past summer.
That's awesome.
I think it's a little bit different because it is animation and it's geared more towards children. It's like I agree with you that it's very well written and voice acted, and the score is awesome. But because it's geared towards children, like the cartoons I watched growing up, like Ninja Turtles, things like that, they didn't die. It's a kids show. Yeah. But I also think it's rated Y7, like Youth 7.
I think it is, yeah. And we know, I don't know what Clone Wars was, if it was the next step up on TV ratings or what.
Yeah, I think that honestly they need to have one character make the sacrifice so that maybe kids can kind of realize that is
a good point.
An ultimate sacrifice. But I don't think they should kill off everyone because, again, it is a kid's show, but it's a great show, but...
Yeah, there's this really like I totally agree with you, and yet there's this interesting tension because you look at the Star Wars galaxy, and like you said earlier, is like vast, but at the same time you're like, wait a minute. So Kanan is a Jedi. He's a Jedi Knight. He was knighted in season 2.
Yeah.
Ezra is getting freaking powerful.
Yeah.
Maul's running around.
Yeah.
None of these people who were this powerful are mentioned in the original trilogy, and I get it. Like, they were made way back when, but you want to go for some story continuity.
Yeah.
And so I think people just keep running into this, like, how do they make it? Like, what do you do with them? And I think we can speculate forever on that. But you brought up something really interesting about, like, the ultimate sacrifice, and, like, it would be good for kids to see that. Like, it would aid that story. And we've seen that a few times. We've seen it, like, obviously with Vader and Luke at the end of Return of the Jedi, Obi-Wan in A New Hope, letting himself go away. We have the death of Yoda as well. And Yoda is one of the few natural, it feels like it's a natural caused death. He's just old. And so we see all these different facets of death in Star Wars, yet that concept of the ultimate sacrifice that we've talked about, I think it probably is going to happen on Rebels. And I think it's guaranteed going to happen on Rogue One. Yeah. I think we're going to see these characters die for each other.
Yeah.
But I think in Rebels, I really keep going back to it's going to be Kanan. And that he's going to have to sacrifice himself. I don't know, to bring Ezra back. And I'm just speculating. I have no idea. But that's kind of where I keep landing. Do you go in a different direction, or do you think like, oh, well, if there was going to be this ultimate sacrifice, I think it might be this character?
Well, it depends. Do you know if they're making any more books with like Kanan and Hera? Because they had a New Dawn.
Yeah, well, they have the only one that's sort of connected to Rebels right now is there's an Ahsoka novel coming out in October.
Okay. So I actually was able to read A New Dawn before I read Rebels, which was awesome.
Yeah.
But I agree. I think it's going to have to be Kanan, and I think he already kind of made a sacrifice by, spoiler alert, what happened with Maul at the end of season 2.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. But I think, again, speculation, that he's going to have to be the one to lay down his life to bring Ezra back. Like, I agree with that.
Yeah, Ezra seems to be going down this road, and I think the new season will begin at the end of September, so we're looking at almost a month out, and then season 3 will begin. And there are even clips shown of the season 3 coming up where Ezra looks awesome, and he's he's a bad A, and he's like running around kicking butt.
Yeah.
Yet there's this, he's been walking this line, and he seems to he just cut down stormtroopers like they were nothing.
Yeah.
Luke obviously did the same kind of stuff.
Anakin obviously did too. And even if you go back to some of the books, like it seems like Obi-Wan was kind of along the same line, and even Qui-Gon, I think, they were all kind of walking that line. That line.
Yeah. And like, when do you bring about death? When do you bring, Yeah. And so Ezra's kind of in that line, and Kanan, though, is as roguish as he is, there's kind of pure Jedi concept to him going on.
Yeah.
And I find the character compelling. I've heard some people say his arc is over. Like, when you look at like a typical character arc, and they're like, I don't see what else you can do with Kanan. It's like, he must die. And I hear that. I actually hear that with Zeb as well. Like, there's not much else you can do with him. Kill him off. And so I don't necessarily like that logic, but whenever I look at the story, I just keep going back to Kanan, and I just keep thinking it makes sense in the story if Ezra's the focus to lose his mentor.
Yeah.
Like we've seen in episode 1, like we've seen in episode 4, like we see this, and in a sense, episode 7, Han was Rey's mentor.
Yeah.
And or at least some sort of father figure.
Yeah.
And there's variations on that mentor motif, but we see this happen, and in keeping with kind of the Star Wars rhythm, I hate to say it, I think Kanan might go at some point.
Yeah.
And I love the character, but going back to what we're talking about, I don't think it's a bad thing for children to see that. And, you know, as we kind of propel ourselves into thinking about the real world, we've read all sorts of stories growing up of people laying down their lives for someone else. It's in some ways, in some religions and faiths, they even say it is the ultimate form of love, is to lay your life down to save another life. And, you know, I wonder, you know, and you can get very melodramatic with this, but also you can get very practical. And you go, well, those firemen running up the stairs in the World Trade Center, like they were there was probably some type of recognition that this was bad.
Or the passengers on that United flight.
Yeah, United 4. Yeah. It's like it's amazing how we see the echo of that in our history, and then also the echo of this in our stories that we love. And you need to be careful, especially with children, because they're so, you know, like you can mold them in so many ways, but this is sort of the molding I don't mind.
Yeah.
And, you know, Sam, my son, who's 4, he'll be 5 in a few months, but Sam will watch these stories and he'll comment on it. Like, oh, he died, Dad. I'm like, yeah, he did. Why? And he's like, well, he's saving so-and-so. And we've had that conversation multiple times. And I tell him every time, I'm like, he's loving that person, Sam. Do you understand that? And he doesn't get it yet, but it's that process of, you know, we look at death in so many different ways and contexts, but there's this one way that's very, very special that actually communicates love. And we've seen it so many times in Star Wars. I have a feeling Kanan's gone. All that to say, Kanan's dead.
Bum, bum, bum.
Oh man. So just as we were, you know, discussing the death of characters in Star Wars, what were your kind of big moments? Please tweet at us. Let us know who were the characters that really had an impact on you when they died. Bring in Clone Wars, because there was a lot of characters passing away in various contexts from that show that frankly was very powerful, and we would love to hear your thoughts on that. Hey, as always, thank you for listening to the show. We're so appreciative of that. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at UnmistakablySW. You can also go to our website at unmistakeblystarwars.com. Keep an eye out on our website. We have a bunch of articles coming out this week, one of which deals with the characters in Rogue One and if they should die. Devin Cleffer will be writing that. And as always, may the Force be with you.
Thanks for listening to Unmistakably Star Wars. Join us again next week for more news and insights like only we can bring you. Until then, lock the door and hope they don't have blasters.